First off, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's session. I'm Adam Berezin from MS Dynamics World, and once again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's session, which is going to focus on electronic payments with Dynamics GP, and is going to be presented by Sarah Chowdhury and Stephen Miller, both from MineralTree. So at the end of the session, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and share your point of view, and if you have any questions during the session, just please feel free to type them into the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. Sarah, without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. Sarah and I are excited to be here with everybody, and we will get started. So my name is Stephen Williams. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at MineralTree, and I'm here today with Sarah as well. She's an account executive at MineralTree and one of the true product experts that we have here. And so we're excited to talk to you today about payments, electronic payments, and fraud that exists within the world of payments, and some steps that can be taken to help alleviate some of the challenges that companies may face. And so what I'd like to do is just talk quickly about MineralTree in general, just to give a quick background about who we are and what we do, and then we'll dig into the rest of the agenda. But MineralTree is an accounts payable or AP automation solution. So we manage it from an invoice capture all the way to the payment execution, increasing efficiency across the board for companies that are using, say, GP, for example. We're founded in 2010, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, just out of Boston, and right now we currently have over 1,500 companies currently using our platform to increase efficiency within accounts payables, processing over $3 billion in annual payments. And one of the unique things about our solution, in addition to working directly with businesses, a bank will also purchase our platform from us, private label it, and then offer it out to their commercial businesses as a way to continue to increase business efficiency for their clients. And with that, we're excited to talk to you about some of the learning objectives for the webinar today are understanding where fraud occurs today within the accounts payable process, how thinking about electronic payments can mitigate some of that fraud risk, and really understanding and thinking about what a payment strategy should look like, and then how, from a true story perspective, how automation actually can prevent fraud from these companies, and thinking about how that ties into GP. And then what does automation look like, specifically if you're using GP or say NAV? What does it look like when it's brought in together with your accounting system? So to get started, maybe what we'll do, Adam, if you can launch the first poll for us. The question is about how their client, how either they are, if they're in business, or if they're working with their clients, how are they making most of their AP payments today? So if you don't mind launching that for us.
Let me see if I can do this.
Okay, so people should see that poll, and we'll give them a second here to put their answers in. Right, Adam, and you can see how it's coming. If you think that most people have got their answers in, then we can show what the responses look like.
Sure. The question was, how do you or your clients make most of their AP payments? And the results, let me just actually, so paper check, we had 38%. 4% said ACH, 4% said credit card, and that was it.
Interesting. Okay, so we missed a bunch of people, but I think what you find there is that paper check is still one of the most prevalent ways that people are making their payments today, right? And so what we do at MineralTree each year for the last 3 years, we've done a research report on the state of accounts payables, and the whole idea is to get a cross-section of finance professionals from different company types, sizes, industries, and what their role is, whether it's CFO to kind of the controllers or accounts payable managers and accounting managers, right? So we got a nice cross-section in that, and with that, one of the questions that we asked as well there was, what are the common payment methods today? And what you see is, almost over 60% said that checks are either exclusively or frequently used the most, right? And then you get into the ACH and credit card. So I think within the industry, AFP talks about some of their data suggests that checks are around 54% of all payments made, where actually in the middle market companies, so if that's a company in the range of say 10 million to 300, 400 million, checks, what we find with our current customers are checks are used much more widely, up in the 60 to 70%, and sometimes 80%. And so part of that is thinking, well, why are checks so prevalent? And then what are some of the risks associated with that? And so we'll dig into that a bit more. And then also thinking about a payment strategy in general, of how do you think about optimizing your payments from timing, from type of payments that you're making, so that you're really making the most of them. And so what we've found here is in the survey as well is that what finance professionals want in an AP automation solution, one of the biggest things that they want is to offer fraud protection, right? 70% said that's something that's really important. So what we'll be talking about today is how do you think about that? How is, if you're using GP today, how is that helping you within the fraud protection? But most likely there are some challenges there, and you kind of need to think about what your manual process is. If you don't have an AP automation solution in place, how are you preventing yourself from fraud, and what are some of the ways and steps that you can do to mitigate some of the risks that you're exposed to potentially? And so what we'll find as we go through is sometimes it's dependent on what your volumes look like on that side of it as well, right? If you have higher volumes or lower volumes, the question is, are you still at risk if you're only making 100 payments a month? And so maybe, if you don't mind, Adam, if you can launch the next poll as well, that will help just give an indication of where companies are, because I think that's an important indicator for how open to fraud you are.
Okay. All right. So what is your monthly payment volume? 4% said less than 100. 8% said 101 to 250. 8% said 251 to 500. 24% said 501 to 1,000. And then 12% indicated that they process over 1,001 per month.
Great. Yeah, really helpful to see. And I think what you find is that it doesn't necessarily matter how many payments you're doing, whether you're doing 1,000 or under 100. I think the key thing to remember is that you are open to fraud. It's what that shows is most of the companies that are responding here are showing that kind of within that middle market range of a company size, right, where they've got enough volume from an accounts payable perspective that if you're doing it manually, there's some pain associated with it, and then as a result, then there's some spots in there where you're open to fraud. And so interestingly enough, some people may have seen this, but AFP does a payments fraud and control survey each year as well. And what this is showing is that 78% of organizations that participated in their survey, I think they maybe had 600, 700 or so participants in the survey, indicated that they'd experienced attempted or actual payments fraud during 2017. And you can see here that trend over time in the last 10 years where, what's happening is most companies out there are experiencing some type of fraud or another. And I think the whole question is, how are you protecting yourself and thinking about that payment method, right? You saw it tick up from 74% to 78% in the last year, right? Fraudsters are getting very creative, and so it's important to be thinking about your overall payment strategy and how can you help mitigate some of that, right? And when you take a step deeper into that, which payment methods are the most susceptible to fraud? And as you can see, checks represent 74% are open to fraud, right? And so as we talked about earlier in that poll question, we mentioned that was the largest percentage of payments. And so that's an indication that if the most payments are happening via checks, then you're going to have the highest potential for fraud as well. I mean, there's some numbers there, but you can see that wire transfers are second, and then you get into some of the other electronic payment methods, and that fraud attempts goes down. And what the report talked about was that the losses that are represented could be anywhere from 0.5% to 1.5% of the annual revenues tied to those companies, right? So there's the potential where you can have significant losses. And so thinking about their checks, how they're being forged, is something that's really important to think about ways to mitigate that. And we'll talk about some of those strategies. The other important thing to think about, and this is from the AFP survey as well, from 2017, the year before, but this gives you a good trend line of how things have evolved over time, right? Checks, you could say it's getting better, But you could also argue that you can see checks are still ranging in the 85 to 75, now 77, 78%, whereas you have the wire number, which is that blue line, that is spiked up dramatically. We'll talk about why that is, but it just shows you the impact, whereas the electronic ones are remaining consistent. And you can see where credit cards, which is that gray line, spiked up around 2013, and then you can start to see the trends coming back down, right? Credit card fraud exists, but there's ways to mitigate that as well with virtual cards or tokenization of cards, and we'll talk about that. So the question is, where are these fraud attempts coming from? So you have an idea and you can be prepared and take the necessary action. Well, mostly 63% from the FBA survey said they're coming from outside the organization, outside individuals where they're stealing cards or forging checks, which is one of the biggest things. Then the next is business email compromise. And so we're going to talk about those two mainly for this webinar, but it's a host of number of things. But in general, with technology, as you think about the check side of things, it is definitely a risk that exists out there with people being able to duplicate checks in a much more realistic way, where they can replicate your checks with your check numbers and try to cash them. So business email compromise, as I mentioned, is an important risk that is prevalent across all industries, and all companies need to be aware and thinking about it, right? It's grown in the last 3 years to 77% of organizations have experienced fraud or attempted fraud from business email compromise, right? And the FBI recently came out with a report that showed over the last 5 years, almost $12 billion domestically and internationally has been lost because of business email compromise. So the question is, how are you protecting yourself at your organization? What processes do you have in place? What trainings have you done so that people are aware and they're not being fooled by what can happen so very easily? And we'll talk about that. So as far as how the money's getting out, right, business email compromise is the beginning, then how is the money leaving the building, so to speak? Wire transfers continues to be the top one there, and then followed by checks as well. And so some really information from the AFP that just talks about how widespread and prevalent it is, and things that companies can be aware of and put processes in place to do that. And so maybe what we can do is think about that. Maybe the poll question here, if you don't mind launching this, Adam, is just which accounting system are you on, and that will help kind of guide some of the conversation as well.
Why don't we move on without that poll for now?
All right, so we'll move on. We can come back to it. So as we talked about, the key points of exploitation in the accounts payable fraud, right? When you think about the accounts payable process, you've got the invoice capturing and the approvals of those invoices. You have the payment authorization and then the actual payment execution. And so as we think about those, right, when you look at what is the manual AP process look like today, there's a lot of steps in that manual AP process. You've got receiving, entering data, coding that data, managing multiple processes to get approvals, verifying, coding, and those approvals, and then queuing up some payments. Then you need to modify multiple potentially payment reports. You've got to authorize the release of them and then process those payments, send them, reporting them, getting them back into your accounting system. All very manual in certain ways, and so there's many steps in here that can expose a company to potential fraud. So first, if we take a look at fraud in invoice capture and approvals, right? There's the possibility where you can have fabricated invoices can be sent into your business, they enter into your business invoice approval and payment workflow, right? So think about a situation where, if a company is receiving, as we heard earlier in the poll, if you're getting 500, 1,000 invoices a month, right, someone's got to keep a close eye on all those invoices coming in and make sure that you're checking them, right? So there's potential in a fraud perspective for outside as well as internal fraud that could happen, where an employee might even fake an invoice and then processing the invoice, and they've got a scheme that's running inside of a large organization that they don't have the proper controls in place. And so the employee pays the invoice along with the other batch of legitimate invoices, right? There's electronic payment solutions, include these online workflows that build in segregation of duties to help prevent that fraud from happening or ever getting paid. And later in the webinar, you'll actually see how that works in action. But it's really important to think about segregation of duties and creating these processes that, right, every payment that is going to go out is a result of some invoice that has come in. And so do you have a secure process in place to manage how those invoices are coming in and being coded and then routed for approvals? So a way to manage that, another kind of potential fraud in invoice capture and coding is kind of overcharging by vendors without the appropriate controls can lead to kind of leaking that goes unnoticed, right? Sometimes vendors are constantly sending in duplicate invoices, and then maybe the system, if you don't have good processes in place to catch those duplicate invoices, you're sending out multiple payments and you're not necessarily recognizing that depending on what your reconciliation process looks like. And it may be that it's gone out the door and now you need to spend all the time figuring out how to get it back or what that workflow is to kind of rectify it. But in the end, when you have key processes in place on the electronic side of things going up to that payment, then it's going to help you alert when duplicate invoices are coming in, so you're not going to make those duplicate payments. So the other side is fraud within the payment authorization, right? If you have, in addition to the vendors overcharging without the appropriate controls, you have the employer receives an email from the CEO to make a payment. And this comes into that business email compromise, right? You've all heard of the story where an email comes in and they say, hey, can you wire out $30,000? And because it's the CEO or the CFO, then they say, okay, well, I probably need to do this. And typically the amount isn't so great so that it raises red flags. It usually looks like a re-email, or they're doing these phishing scams, and it comes in, and very often in a manual process where they don't have segregation of duty, then that invoice, that wire might just go out, even without an invoice or anything, right? And so there's a lot of risk, and that's why when we were talking earlier with the AFP survey, where you saw a lot of business email compromise happening. Other examples are where fake vendors are sending information into your company saying, we need you to update the information, our address where you're sending our bills, right? And so the question is, do you have something in place to validate that that's actually where the bills should be sent? How are you managing that vendor information? So that's another thing to really be aware of and think about. So, and then lastly, when you think about fraud within payment execution, right? The fraudsters out there are forging checks. They're doing it on your bank account numbers, they obtain your bank account information, and they're writing fake checks against your account. And the challenge is most commercial accounts aren't covered for this type of fraudulent activity, right? And so thinking about that, being aware of it, there's a couple of things that you need to think through to actually mitigate those risks. One of which is a positive pay file. Another is how do you decrease the number of checks you're writing and convert them to electronic payments, whether it be ACH or moving your spend onto a credit card or a virtual card network that, for example, MineralTree has. It provides one-time use amount and specific to that vendor for a set period of time, right? There's ways that you can mitigate some of those risks by just thinking through the payment strategy side of it. So here's an example that happened here to me at MineralTree, right? I received an invoice for just under $3,800 from a business called Leaders Media Group, and it was for marketing and advertising purchases, right? And so what could happen is if the AP team could receive it, and they're like, okay, this is likely an invoice for Steven. It's not that much money. It seems correct, and they might just go off and pay it, right? Meanwhile, I haven't actually looked at it. I haven't officially approved it. But what did happen is it came in, I looked at it, and I didn't recognize it. I went through everything and I was like, this is not one of our invoices. Recognized it was a scam, and I flagged it back to our AP team, and it didn't get paid. Now, there's a couple ways that could happen. You know, you're walking over, you're putting it on a desk, but think about hundreds of invoices are moving around. That's a lot of things can kind of fall through the cracks in that way. Whereas with an automation process, all the invoices get scanned, put into our system, they get routed to me directly, and then I can review and see if that is actually something that should be paid or not. I can reject it, and then it goes into our system where the vendor's never even created in the accounting system, and that, thankfully, that bill was never paid for the $3,800. And what's interesting, as I've kind of told the story to other people, they've actually experienced the same challenge as well, where they've received almost the same exact invoice. And They also, some of our customers said, thankfully we had systems in place to protect ourselves, and we didn't end up paying it, but we could see how in the past we may have actually paid this invoice that was faked. And so it's really important to think through how you put processes in place to make sure that not only are the invoices coming in accurate, but then the way in which you're making those payments afterwards cleared up, and you've got a good process in place with the appropriate segregation of duties. And so when you think about automating AP and integrating that in, say, with GP or NAV, right, where the two need to work together to really streamline that process to improve your overall security. And when you automate it, you're taking a lot of those manual steps out where there could be holes in the process, and you're really kind of honing in on the key steps for reviewing and ensuring that everything is working appropriately, and you're not opening yourself up to that potential fraud. So when you think about what are some critical payment controls that you should be putting in place, one of which is dual-factor authorization, which that is to prevent someone from hacking into your system, leveraging your passwords. And so if you're not familiar with what that is, in essence, anytime we're going to release funds, and Sarah will talk about this in a little bit, but as you think about releasing payments, what will happen is when an approver to release the payments logs in, they're going to get also a code that they need to enter that's sent to their phone. And they need to enter that code into their phone so that they can continue to log in. So that someone who's somehow stolen your password can't be logging in, they would have to have stolen your phone and everything, right? So it's a safeguard that you can put in place from a releasing of the funds out of your bank accounts. The second part, which is really important, is within the full accounts payable process is segregation of duties. You're setting up your systems to check all the B2B payment-related activity. What that means is, and Sarah will explain how this plays out, but is the person who's setting up all the payments, managing the approvals, the coding, and saying how we're going to pay them, when we're going to pay them, different than the person who has the authority to then release the funds out of the bank account. Creating that segregation of duties is really important because it both reduces the risk of payments that could be going out that are not supposed to be going out. So coming back to that business email compromise, right? If everything is following the appropriate workflow and the CEO or the CFO sends that email that's been spoofed on their email account in to wire money out, it still needs to go through the system, and it still needs to come back for them to either approve it, in which case then they're going to catch it. And we've heard countless times where companies have been able to actually catch these scams that have come up. Purchase order matching is another important one. We've got workflow rules if you're not using purchase orders where it's routing to the right person to make sure that everything is legitimate and should be paid. But in addition, purchase order matching just allows you to say, okay, are we tying everything off from what the purchase order said versus what the invoice is coming in, or the two matching together, and that helps mitigate some of the risk. Positive pay files are another really important one in a service that banks are offering, but leveraging a solution like MineralTree, when we're going to offload all of your check processing for you so you don't have to have check stock in the office and run that risk. What also happens is when you have the number of checks that you may be sending out, then we're going to send out a file to your bank so that they're alerted based on the account number, the check number, the dollar amount, that it's matched, so they know what to be expecting. And then in line with that is what can also help prevent some of the fraud or catch it sooner is daily reconciliation. A lot of companies, if they're reconciling on a daily basis and they have systems in place that allow that to be more efficient and easier, then they might be able to catch whether it's fraud or maybe it's just errors, but it allows them to check things on a daily basis that catches it rather than waiting for a month and you can't pull something back. And then the last part is tied to virtual cards or tokenization. And we touched upon this earlier, but this is an important one because I think it comes back to the whole payment strategy. If we know that checks are the most prevalent for fraud, then how do we think about switching to more safe electronic payment methods, whether it be via ACH or from a virtual card perspective? And in essence, what that's doing is saying, okay, we're going to help you identify of your vendors which one of them accept card solutions and card payments, and from there you can actually then make those vendor payments on a credit card. And what that does is it says, okay, I'm going to authorize $1,200 payment to Staples for a 30-day period, and they would run that card, and then it comes out of your account as a debit, right? And that is creating that safeguard so that no one else is going to be able to charge that one-time use card number. After it's done, and it can't be used. So it's really a good way to think about your overall payment strategy. And often with MineralTree, for example, when you're using that payment method, you also earn rebates. So you could earn 0.5% back on all of your AP spend that you can push to this electronic payment method, which is a nice way to get, in some ways, get paid for making your payments while also increasing the security tied to them. So thinking about with cloud-based softwares and payment securities, one of the interesting things that came out of the 17 AIC survey is that 85% of IT security professionals at organizations weren't necessarily confident that their current technology was effective in protecting their information, right? And so it's thinking through, no one wants to be exposing themselves to fraud, but we know that fraudsters are going to attempt to kind of break down those walls and find the gaps in your processes and take advantage of that. And so the way to think about it is what are you doing within your current AP and payment process? How are you making those payments? Knowing where you have the highest risk of fraud, what steps can you be doing to mitigate that? And how can transitioning to more electronic payment solutions help? And I think there's a lot to be said about sometimes taking a step back and talking to the teams of whether you're the CFO or you're processing all the payments, reflecting on your current process, understanding how can I optimize it, increase efficiency that decreases loopholes that might be coming through, and then maximize the overall time spent on AP. In the end, what companies will find is that accounts payable automation it not only protects yourself from a security perspective and preventing fraud, but it also ends up saving organizations up to 60% of their time and money when they've automated it because of the efficiencies gained and allows them to focus on other important tasks. And so with that, what I think is helpful to now see is we've talked about these different methods of payment fraud, right? Whether it's business email compromise, segregation of duties, fraudulent checks. So from there, what does that look like in action, right? Because conceptually it may make sense to you, but really, what does it look like, and how do you manage it from that side of it? So I'm going to pass it over now to Sierra, and she's going to show you a bit more about what this looks in practice with Microsoft Dynamics systems such as GP.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everybody. My name is Sierra. I am from MineralTree. I'm one of the account executives there, and I'm so excited to show you a demo of MineralTree. If you guys have questions while I'm doing this demo, if they come up, please write them down or send them in the little chat thing so I can see them and get them answered for you. If I don't have enough time to get them answered for you on this webinar, I promise I will reach out to you personally via email and get everything done. So I'm going to go through a light demo here of MineralTree. Keep it short and sweet, but give you guys exactly what you need to kind of see if this is going to be something that's helpful for you. And we're going to make sure we talk all about not only how it is going to be more efficient to process AP, more easy to get rid of the paper. Every time somebody requests a demo on our website, they actually always say the same thing, which is we want to get rid of paper. We're tired of looking at the paper and feeling the paper and smelling the paper, and we can do that for you. But what we can also do that is much more valuable, which is what it's going to make it worth it for you guys to change your process and use an automated AP tool for every single payment you make, is the time you'll save, but also the risk you'll reduce when it comes to the fraud that you might be suspect to if you're doing a manual process. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here to MineralTree. Integrates beautifully with Great Plains and a number of other systems, so make sure you let us know which one you're using so we can talk to you about how we can work there. And like I said, please feel free to send over any questions as they come up. The first role I'm going to go into is our accounting manager role. And we have a few different roles here in MineralTree. The main ones are going to be the accounting manager and the payment authorizer. And this is just to make sure that there's a segregation of duties maintained throughout this process, because that way the person that's doing the coding, kind of queuing up the payments, getting everything ready, is not the person that's signing off. So when I log into MineralTree, you can see right here we do have beautiful multi-entity support. So if you have one company or 5 companies or whatever it might be, we can certainly help out. So from here, I'm just going to choose one of my companies, and I'm going to log in. And for this specific demo, something to keep in mind is just how with MineralTree, when it comes to getting set up, it's not a very heavy lifting, long process. We integrate with Great Plains so easily that once you connect MineralTree and GP, all of the vendor information, all the open bills, everything that comes up, everything that you'll need in our product is kind of already coming. What will change moving forward is where you put your bills. So instead of manually keying them in, you're just going to email them or scan them into a product, and those will you can also put them into the inbox here. We'll give you some kind of email address for them to be received in, and we will do a capture process overnight and then process those bills. So even, not even a minute into this demo, I can show you exactly why this process is going to be so much better. During the webinar that, during the slides that Stephen was presenting, he mentioned we actually got like a fake bill at MineralTree. Somebody tried to send him a fake marketing bill, and it was interesting, but it was kind of exciting for us because we had a real life example to share with all of our prospects. So somebody sent him a fake bill, and as you can see right here with MineralTree, where this comes into play is that some of the vendors have a hyperlink as a name, and some of them have a plain text as a name. So we understand with the companies that are going to be interested in AP automation, you guys are likely growing, you're probably getting new vendors, bills are coming in the email, they're coming in via mail, whatever it might be. And some vendors you might have that you're getting bills from, they might not yet be set up in Great Plains. And the good part about MineralTree is that if we get a bill and we don't recognize the vendor, we're not just going to toss it out or not capture it or something like that. We're going to capture it, but we're going to bring it to your attention immediately by showing you that, hey, this bill, this vendor name is in plain text, so that means you guys need to take a second look at this bill, because either you don't have this vendor set up in Great Plains, or it looks a little bit different than the other vendors that come over, the other bills that come over from Atlantic Coast freezers. So a mistake that could easily happen, especially if you have maybe a new staff member that's reviewing your finances and reviewing your bills as you guys grow, maybe they don't realize that this looks different than what you usually get invoiced for. We will catch that for you, so that way you can either delete the bill if it's fake, or you can find the vendor name and just kind of save it from there. For the vendors that we do find, we're just going to capture the invoices, and you'll click on the invoice number right here, and you'll be able to actually see the PDF of the bill that we picked up, and you'll actually be able to see all the information that we captured at the line level. I know that you guys don't like to key these things in by hand, and this is kind of a given with our tool and any other tool that we do OCR, but what we do differently to make sure that you guys are getting as much value as possible is we do OCR and human review, so that if you guys have any bills that look a little funky, or they don't, the vendor has some kind of weird logo, we can still pick up the data off the bill, no problem there. This is just going to be kind of what it looks like for a regular bill that's, expensive, but for the bills that do have POs, which is a big part of, as you guys continue to grow, keeping control over what you guys have agreed with your vendor versus what they're billing you for. You can see right here, when we do find a PO that's in Great Plains, and we find that, a PO number on the invoice, we actually can do an automatic match, so that way you guys can kind of look and see what's lining up and what's not. So the green will mean that what we picked up on the bill kind of lines up beautifully with what is in GP, so you should be good to go ahead and post those. I would still take a second look just in case. And then the red would mean that it's mismatched. So there's some kind of, there's some kind of mismatch between the amount that the vendor is giving you and what you guys have entered originally, so you might have to go hash that out with the vendor. But we're going to do that automatically for you, so that way you don't have to worry about spending your time looking through all that work and even spending all that work kind of lining up things. So this is the PDF of the bill. This is the information that we picked up off the bill. And then this is these are the line items that we've captured. So all you have to do is you just have to look at the PO right here, and you can see that PO coming over from Great Plains into MineralTree. And what you'll do to just go ahead and build this PO is just click on the number, enter the line item, hit one button, link, and it'll automatically tell you what's lining up and what's not. And this is how you can easily build a PO as well. So once you've done the linking, you'll just hit post to GP, and then hit save, and it'll go ahead and build that PO for you, so you don't have to go into your other system and do that different work. There's a few different levels of approval that you can work in here as well. That's going to be pretty important, because in addition to making sure that the person that's doing this kind of billing work and the person that's posting the bills into GP and getting everything kind of queued up for payment, is not the same person releasing it, you also want to make sure that those same people that were involved with dealing with this vendor and making sure that they get their stuff are involved with looking at the bill and, making sure that it's properly approved and everybody signs off and you agree on the amounts and stuff. So with the POs, it'll be pretty simple because obviously the PO will be in Great Plains. But for invoices that are not tied to POs, if you guys aren't in that process yet where you're entering POs in for everything, no problem at all. You can either build automated workflows by vendor or by company. So that way when a bill comes in for this vendor or when a bill comes in general, it goes to this person, that person. Or you can kind of build workflows ad hoc if you're not there yet with how you want to structure things. Once you click on the bill, if you just scroll to the very bottom of the screen right here, I'll just kind of scroll right here, you can easily just type in the name of the person you want to send this to. So I'll just type in Andrew's name, and then after Andrew, I'll type in the other Andrew, that's what I can think of right now. You can see right here that you can do up to 4 tiers of approvals, and within each tier, you can actually do multiple people. And you can make it so that maybe all of the people have to sign off, or some, whatever you need. So that way, this bill is definitely real, it's definitely good, it's definitely been approved, and you'll do all of this before it ever hits your accounts in GP. So that way, you'll make sure that every single bill that's going into GP is a real bill, it's approved, it's correct, because we know the process with Great Plains. Once you create a bill in GP, you have to post the batch, all that stuff. If you need to make a change, you have to delete the bill. It seems pretty painful. We've been through it before. So at least with this process, you'll be able to post bills in batches. You'll know that they're good bills. And once you do post the batch, you'll be able to easily pay them. So you don't have to worry about, things not lining up. So after you've gone through, after you've gotten approvals on bills, you've matched them to POs, you'll just easily click post right here, and essentially anything that hasn't been posted. So how you'll know is anything that hasn't been posted says draft, anything that has been posted says box. You'll just hit post, and anything that was in draft mode automatically changes into a box. You can select what you want. I like this, or if you guys have a bunch of bills, you can easily select this batch button. That'll select everything. I'm not going to select all of them right now, but you get the point. You click this green button, and then within 15 minutes or less, those bills will be created in Great Plains. So a few things here. We do have that check against the vendors. We do have the ability to add multiple approval layers. We do have the segregation of duties, so it's at least 2 people signing off on bills before they ever get paid. And we do have the PO matching to make sure that everything is lining up in terms of amount. But with MineralTree specifically, because those are features that are important in any API automation tool, with us specifically, we all understand that time is money, and you guys don't have all the time in the world to sit and wait for things to get posted into GP. So that's why our product, when it comes to the connector we have and the way we sync with GP, it's always running in the background. So if I post this batch, it'll go into GP in 15 minutes or less. We guarantee that. And then once I'm ready to make a payment, I can either make payments in MineralTree or make payments in Great Plains, whatever one you want. And once you do make those payments, it'll automatically update in the back as well. So you don't have to go through this process, which is importing, exporting, even making sure things match. Not only is that going to take too much of your time up, but it's also subjecting you to more mistakes. So after you've posted your bills, the process will be, you'll just choose the bills you want to pay from here just by clicking on the boxes. You'll click this green button that's creating a batch. So maybe this is me, I'm an accountant, I'm kind of getting a batch together for my CFO. I'm choosing the dates that I want them to go out, I'm choosing the amounts, whatever I want. And then once I do that, I'll hit confirm. You can choose the payment type. It looks like we only have one payment type set up in this demo account, but we do have check, ACH, virtual card, whatever you prefer set up in our system, so you can pay your vendors regardless of who they are and how they get paid in one process. You can add notes for the CFO, so you can say, please pay ASAP. I'm sure your notes look a lot nicer than mine, but you can hit submit, and then once I do this, my CFO is getting that notification to approve this payment batch and release. So once they release it, the bills will get marked as paid in GP. Before I show you that, just going back to my point of our two-way sync, if you guys have a scenario where a vendor shows up and you need to cut them a check manually because they're at your door, you can absolutely still do that in GP, not a problem. And that's where our two-way sync comes into play. When a bill is marked as paid in GP, it'll automatically get marked as paid in MineralTree as well, so it'll stop you from doing duplicate payments. Who wants to pay vendors twice? Why is that a good thing in any way? It's not. So we'll try to catch that mistake for you if it's ever made, and we'll make it really hard to pay vendors twice. And we'll give you as much visibility as possible into where things are with our reporting features. So the next step I'm going to do is kind of just show you what that payment approver role looks like. And as I go over there, I just wanted to kind of highlight a little bit more about our virtual cards and our tokenization. When you do sign up with MineralTree and you get all set up, what we can do for you is we can do a vendor enrollment for you, which shows you all vendors you have that can accept virtual cards. MineralTree has this amazing payment network called SilverPay, and it's because we have all these vendors. Obviously, we're sending out $4 billion in payments every year. We have tons and tons of vendors that all of our clients use. So what we've done is we've developed this payment network of vendors that are already accepting MineralTree virtual cards. And if we see that you have a vendor that's in our virtual payment network, we'll set you up to pay them with virtual card for free. It won't be a single dime of cost on your end. And we'll be able to make it so that you can email them virtual cards. The money is debited directly from your bank account, but it's sent on MasterCard rails. And the good part about that is not only do you get to pay your vendors for free, not only are they one-time use cards that you get to send within minutes and it's super easy, but on top of that you get rebates back. So we will literally pay you to pay your vendors. I can't think of anything more easy and better than that. Who wants to sign checks and you don't get anything for signing checks? Who wants to manually send ACHs out? Use MineralTree. We can do your checks for your non-virtual card accepting vendors. We can do ACHs for them, but on top of that, we will show you every vendor that you could possibly be paying for free and set you up to do so. We have tons and tons of clients. Every quarter, we're sending out checks that get either offset or get really close to offsetting the cost of MineralTree because our payment network is so large. We have vendors like FedEx, NetSuite, just the big ones I can think of right off the top of my head, the big ones that you can pay, and I know that you guys probably have those, so definitely we'll help you with that. So now I'm going to go into my payment approver role and show you exactly what it looks like to sign off on those payments to make sure that they get out to your vendors. We will send an email to your payment approver letting them know, like log in, approve these payments, and if they don't, they ignore that email and the payments are getting late, then we'll send them a reminder so they go and do it. So that way, on top of saving time and getting fraud protection, you can also avoid late payments. And you can see right here it says your security code was set to my phone number. So I just got a text, and I'm going to type in the security code so that way they know it's me that's logging in. This is obviously a great feature, the two-factor authentication, but I like to point out that worst case scenario, if for some reason somebody managed to get your password and your phone and all this kind of stuff, they still really would not be able to get that far with sending out fraudulent payments because I'm logging in and I can only release what my accounting manager has queued up. So in order for somebody to hack your MineralTree, they'd have to hack your accounting manager, their phone, and your MineralTree, which is definitely a lot of work. It's not easy, and we make it that way on purpose. If for some reason some super genius gets to do that, we do have this guarantee. It's called our SilverGuard guarantee, so that and we'll insure you up to $100,000 for any fake payments, bad payments that are made. So you are protected with us. So I just kind of clicked on the payments tab to see kind of what's waiting my approval, and I can see at a high level vendors that I need to pay, the amounts, the due dates. My accounting manager queued them up, and if I wanted to, I could easily hit approve all and send these all out at once with the click of a button. Certainly this will be a lot easier than signing checks, looking at that paper manually. But if I need to get into some of that detail, all I will do is click on the vendor name, and I can see recent payments that were made to that vendor. So I can see I sent them a $19,000 check on whatever date, or this is actually this one, but you can see who submitted this one. You can see you can change the date if you want to change the date. If you want to see that actual document, say goodbye to file cabinets, because you can see it right here. You can see how it's coded, and you can see also the history of this bill as well. So every single piece of information and more will be at the tip of your fingers for every payment that you're making. You can see the notes that the approvers wrote. You can see who approved it, other payments that were made on the invoice. And when you're ready, if you need to reject it for some reason, you can easily hit reject and then submit it back to the accounting manager. They'll get an email and let them know why you rejected it. You can hold it and come back to it later, or you can hit approve and then proceed to confirmation. So once you hit proceed to confirmation and submit, that is when we're sending out that check for you. So virtual cards are sent out lightning fast. They go out every 15 minutes. So not only are obviously the best way to pay your vendors, but they're the fastest, so you can hold on to your money longer. ACHs are sent out depending on your bank, either the same day because of the ACH cutoff time or the next business day. So still really fast. And then checks are sent out the next day. At 4 o'clock in the morning, we print them and mail them out on your behalf with your company's information on them. So all payment methods, they will definitely be fast with MineralTree, but virtual card is definitely the best in terms of security and speed and money back. And because we don't use clearing accounts, another reason you should use MineralTree as an AP automation tool instead of the other competitors we have, is because we don't use clearing accounts, we will send your payments out fast no matter what. A lot of the companies that we have that are competitors that take money out of your bank account and then wait for the money to clear before they send out checks, not only does that cause a delay, but it's harder for you to track where your payments are. We will make it so that your daily reconciliation is so much easier, because once the vendor has cashed the payment, you'll see it cleared directly from your bank account. So not only will we decrease your issues, but if there is one, you'll be able to see it a lot faster. So pretty much it for demo. I know it was pretty fast, but I have a lot more features, a lot more exciting things to show you in our product. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So please, if you guys have questions or if you want to see a full demo with me, just send a request on our website. We'll get onto you as quickly as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really helpful and great to see how we can take some of the risks that are out there with payments and put it in action in ways that automation can help reduce that risk. And as Sarah mentioned, there's a couple questions coming in now, but for the audience out there, if you do have questions on the question panel, feel free to enter them in and we can answer them for you. And let me just take a look at some of the ones coming in and we can answer those for you. So here's a question. One of the questions is, how do you guys manage the check processing? Does that mean we don't need to do the checks ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually pretty simple. When you get signed up with MineralTree, we're going to ask you for the address per company that you want to print on the check, the account number and the routing number. Usually you'll just give us a validity check and everything is there. And then you're going to give us a picture of the signature or signatures, because you can do dual signatures, so that we can create the image of the check for you. Once your payment approver approves the payment, we create that image of the check and we actually print it, stamp it, and mail it out. So while you'll still have full control, you won't have to do that manual processing in-house anymore. And you can approve payments from anywhere, and we'll still get those checks out on your behalf.
That's great. Another question is tied to implementation, it seems. How long does it take for companies to get up and running with accounts payable solution like MineralTree?
Yeah, so it's quicker than most people expect. I would say from start to finish, it's a week and a half to 2 weeks. The only thing that typically runs a little bit longer than that is the ACH setup, because we work directly with your bank. Sometimes that can be closer to 5-6 weeks, but still, that's just kind of the last moving piece. Most of it's us waiting on your bank to respond to our messages. If you have some leverage at your bank, usually our clients can make that move faster. But one and a half to 2 weeks to do the integration, do the setup and do your full training and have you guys set up with checks pretty fast. And it's minimal work on your end because our connector is already built out for all of the systems we support. So it's just a matter of getting on a call with your IT guy to do the installation for an hour or so, and then following up with the training later that week so that we can get everything done.
Gotcha. There's another question about the virtual cards again, and I can take that. The question was, how do the virtual cards work? So again, there's a difference between your standard credit card and what our SilverPay network is. It's in essence an electronic payment network that runs over credit card rails, right? And so what happens there is typically it's hard for companies to figure out which companies can I actually pay with my credit card? And even if they are able to figure out some of those companies, they still need to use the plastic card that's in their wallet, right? And so that in itself is a challenge because no one wants to be sending out their real credit card number. So in essence, what the virtual card process does is it takes, it removes the need for any hard plastic card to be used, and we create, through our electronic payment network, we're creating a one-time use charge, in essence, to be run for that particular bill, so the exact amount for that particular vendor, and it's open for a 30-day period. And so we'll, as part of that payment process, very much like you saw us here doing the demo, you would, instead of selecting, say, check, you would select SilverPay, and we would generate that one-time use card number for that, say, $2,000 for XYZ vendor, and you send an email, they've agreed that they're going to accept that payment, they get it, and they would run that card. And then what happens is, once it's run, then it debits right out of your account. So from a reconciliation perspective, it's almost the same as the way in which you would be reconciling a check. But it creates the added security of you're only paying that vendor, your credit card number is not out there anymore, and in addition, you're able to earn rebates. So it's a great way to decrease the potential risk for fraud that comes with checks, as we talked about earlier. All right, well, we're getting on the top of the hour here. It's 3 minutes before the end of the hour, so maybe what we'll do is, with the rest of the questions that have come in, we can handle those after, but Laura, maybe we'll turn it back to you and Adam for closing out the webinar. And we thank everyone for joining, and hopefully you found it informational and informative, and if there's anything else that we can do, please let us know.